men's prison is.
but not the men's.
No, the men's prison was built in the 1800s
And
and does not have any.
no mini splits in the cells.
No.
Just checking.
So how are you surviving the heat wave then? Does it stay pretty cool in there? No.
They bricked up all the, what used to be the windows out onto the main road years and years and years ago, so now it's just a sauna.
All set? Okay. I would like to call to order the Wednesday, July 19th Ethics Committee meeting, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do I have any amendments to the agenda? Anything else we want to talk about tonight?
I think we'll have enough on our
I
hands.
think we do, yeah. All right, and then the next item is the minutes, the July 5th minutes. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I will move to accept the minutes.
Okay. do I have a
Second.
Second, all right. Do we have any amendments?
Elaine, any?
I wrote them, so.
No, I know, but sometimes, when you
Yeah.
read it over.
Okay, hearing
well.
none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, so then the meat of the meeting is the next version of these documents that Neil has so graciously put together. I'm going to start with, I was thinking we'd start with the process document, which is,
This one?
yes.
Okay.
It's not this one.
What was, pardon me, but what was the one we worked on the last
We
term?
did the advice and counsel.
Okay, so I did have a couple of notes on the new form that came, this form was
Yes.
different.
Yeah.
So
So you
just-
want to start with that one since we already were on
Well, I
this
thought
one?
it might be easier to knock that out since
Sure.
they're pretty minor.
So, right, so we. had
Which one
talked-
is this?
The inquiry.
The inquiry one that you
Inquiry, yup.
created.
So just to recap, we were saying we have a box or place for people to anonymously put things, they don't need their contact information. It'll allow us to generically answer some questions and protect from the ones that go into the grievance level, right? So obviously all the information up top is gone. So,
So, small changes, but in the first sentence, the town board member, I think that should be board/committee, since we also have committees in town, and I think that should be reflected throughout all of our documents,
Sure.
wherever it says board/committee.
that makes sense.
And there's a couple of places on this form, one on the back, where that is also true. On this page 2. And next, the hand deliver it, I think we need to say where it's gonna be hand delivered to.
Right. Right, once we figure out if we're gonna have a box outside or in the,
Right.
yep.
And then on,
Wait, let's do that. Hand deliver it to the Ethics Committee, what do you call it, Dropbox, in the foyer, the entryway of this building, yes?
Assuming we can get one, yeah. I mean, I don't mind, I'll buy one and put it up there, but I'll be defacing the wall, so we gotta check with Naomi, but.
Okay, got it.
the next one, if your inquiry, the sentence reads, if your inquiry doesn't materially affect another's reputation, I thought it might be clearer to say, if your inquiry doesn't contain identifying information which might,
Since we already said this above,
where was that?
these
Generally
concerns
identifiable.
should be of a general nature not related to an identifiable person. We could eliminate that first clause.
Excellent.
And then
Yeah,
it just
that's
says the
true,
committee will
because
review.
If it doesn't identify somebody, it can't impact them, right?
Less is more.
Less is always better. Like it.
So it starts with the committee will review?
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, and then on the second page, again, /committee, and then the second check, I think you meant to remove the I. It says I have.
You should have, yep.
Where's this?
So where it says I have, it should just say have, because it's
That's
a,
what,
there's a little I right here. Oh,
Ah,
you don't have one.
apparently I must have changed it because mine doesn't
Yep.
have it, but I will, okay.
Yeah.
When you get it, there will be no I.
And then the other thing is, I would strike thank you, because this is the form they're submitting, and I don't know,
Okay.
just,
Yeah,
didn't-
yeah, that makes sense.
and that is all.
And dated, is that the date we receive it, or is that the date they sent it?
I would suggest that's the date that they give it, that they're going to get this form, so I assume they're going to. put
They're
a
going to date
on
it.
They will date it, okay.
Yep.
Good. Okay,
And that is all.
anyone else have any changes, suggestions?
Okay.
Okay, you're right, that was easy. All right. So do we, why does mine look different than yours? Not the inquiry one, the process one. Maybe I printed the wrong one.
This is the process one.
Yeah, I think that the rules regarding, hold on, look at today. Maybe I didn't print that one out. Oh,
Process, there it is.
too many documents. Okay, for the process. So, do you want me to read each paragraph and then decide if we're good with that?
Is that
Draft 7-1923, where Ethics Committee process for handling inquiries. Yep.
okay, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. So, all ethics concerns, requests for advisory opinions, and formal complaints shall be made to the committee in writing on approved forms and sent to the U.S. mail in a sealed envelope, or, right, or
Right.
dropped here,
What,
right? You don't have the Dropbox, it doesn't match with inquiry.
okay, I'll put in that same language, or
Yeah.
hand-delivered.
Same exact language, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, because I mean, there's not gonna be a party here to collect it or hold it, so if they, would assume if they received mail for us, they'd just drop it in that box, would be the easiest way.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Good. Everybody okay with number one with that change? Good. All right, number two, the chairman, chairperson shall on a weekly basis,
Or just the chair.
or the chairs, shall on a weekly basis collect committee mail and bring it unopened to the next committee meeting where it will be opened and reviewed in non-public. Which is fine. Especially when we meet weekly, because I can actually grab it on the way in, right? So that's, 2A is a request for advice on ethical issue may be made anonymously using Form EC-C:1. If issues raised do not significantly affect someone's reputation. Okay, yeah, wait. The matter will be discussed in public session with the inquirer present if he or she so wishes, and the committee's opinion recorded in the minutes. The committee will not consider requests for advice that may affect someone's reputation significantly. So I wonder if, we don't have the same language that we have on the form as far as, what did you say? Not related to identify a person, right? We need,
The committee will not publicly consider requests for advice that may affect someone's reputation significantly?
We won't consider any, right? Because if it's just a request for advice, then it would be inappropriate to have that identifying information in there, is what we're trying to get across, I think.
yeah,
Okay.
right, because obviously reputation, the reputation is the second one, right? It's the last sentence in that
Yep.
subsection, but we don't say, and part of that, I mean, it's already on the form, but if we're gonna call that out, we might wanna say something about the non-identified information.
Yeah, and so the last sentence of 2, you could also just add, the committee will not
Contain.
consider requests with identifying information, or something to that effect. Because reading through a lot of these, it sounds like we really narrow the scope of what we'll accept, when what we're trying to say is, if you want to use this process, it needs to be just the subject, not targeting an individual, or not
Right.
identifying an individual.
Right.
But this says, this is the process for handling all inquiries.
Right, but this
Right.
one says request for advice on an ethical issue, so that's the inquiry form. So that should just say non-identifiable information, right? And then, because you have one for each section, then B is written advisory and C is the complaint. So the first one's this form. If I read that
If,
right.
okay, if the issue, so
So you were trying to be comprehensive in this one.
So you,
Right.
you want to have the same language here that we have up here?
Yeah.
Not relate to an identifiable person?
Exactly.
Because that's really the case. You can't hurt someone's reputation if you don't know who they're talking about. And I know it's where, so everyone will know who you're talking about, but.
If the issues raised do not relate to an identifiable person,
If they were,
Do not identify
right,
a person. Because, I mean, the reality is they're gonna relate to a person.
so what would you like to say?
What was the language we had on the other phone?
Not related to an identifiable person.
so are not related to an identifiable,
So if the issues raised are not related to an identifiable person.
Yeah.
The matter will be discussed in public session with the inquirer present if he or she so wishes, and the committee's opinion recorded in the minutes. The committee, so
So we can strike that last sentence.
strike the last sentence?
Yep.
Okay.
And then the same thing on B, your last sentence is,
Okay, so B is the advisory opinion. Is that considered, that's also non-identifiable? Okay. Yep.
So, in the written advisory opinion, the way this is written, it could relate to an identifiable person as long as that person's reputation was not going to be significantly adversely affected.
Okay.
And the proposed change is that there be no identifiable person at all.
So, right, to your point, we should probably table the other one and come back and read the request for written advisory opinion, right? So we know what we're talking about here? No?
No, I think, when we get to that form, we can change it, but I think,
The second sentence is this form. See, this is written advisory opinion, that's
Right.
this form. Not this form, this one,
yes,
right? And so,
we'll have to change this.
this, was this one voted on or no? Advice? No, okay.
we only voted on that one.
Oh, I was just thinking, it was part of the original package, this form was. And I didn't know if it went to the town or no.
This, I made no changes in, I
Right.
think it was
No.
revised 10-106.
Okay.
This was what the original committee
Right,
did.
okay, so this form says, the specific issue which you have, write as specific as possible, if necessary, attach extra. So this doesn't say you don't have identify information. So, so, written doesn't affect someone's reputation, we can discuss in public, providing the person. So,
Why don't we say the same thing? If the issues raised do not relate to an identifiable person.
but that's not what this form says.
No, I understand that. We'd have to change.
Right, so I guess that's the turning point. Do we want to go with the original form? And if so, then we can't do this. I don't know that we want to do that in public if we're announcing someone's name, even if it doesn't impact their, I don't know. This is the HR person.
Well, I think that's really the only, I mean, again, this is a public committee, and we're having public hearings or public discussions, so I think that it's not, if raising someone's name here is not prohibited. It's only when you're raising it in the context of potentially damaging their reputation, that, that it becomes an issue. So I don't think there's any prohibition in the statute for identifying someone.
And I think, there was an example last time that I thought was a great example, when we talked about this. We talked about, if somebody came in and made an ethics complaint against me as the secretary of this committee, that I was not submitting minutes of the meetings, and they believed that that was, well, it's against an RSA, but also that it was a violation of my, swearing on a code of ethics that I was going to uphold my position. So is someone going to cancel my birthday for not writing the minutes? Probably not.
Right.
I probably will continue to be gainfully employed, and so on and so forth. So, and I think that's what we weigh, right, when we are unsealing in non-public. I think the five of us would weigh, is the
The
information.
four of us, you wouldn't participate.
That's right, I'd have to
Very good,
recuse myself, you'd
right?
have to boot me out of the
Right,
room.
right.
But, so, the committee would be weighing that, right? So, I don't think we're looking to Luke's point, I don't think we're necessarily looking to prohibit any mention. I think
Okay.
it's just in the areas that we had talked
Gotcha.
about, because also, we're gonna need to have names to be able to, if it's an actual investigation.
Right.
But aren't you talking about a
Complaint.
formal complaint and not a request for an advisory opinion?
I am talking about a formal complaint. So, and I thought that's what we were
That's
talking about.
paragraph C.
Oh, I got ahead of myself.
Yes?
Yeah, no, this is a written advisory opinion, and I guess the thing that's always sort of stuck with me was, what does that mean? Is that a written advisory opinion on a complaint? No, that's a complaint form, right? So this would be inquiry, but written. And if it's an inquiry, then it shouldn't have identifiable information.
And didn't we last week talk, or 2 weeks ago, talk about how, that whole written thing, it would be written in the minutes.
Right, right,
So that we weren't necessarily,
correct.
or am I
No, you're
remembering that?
100% right, so then that comes down to, if this is an inquiry that needs to be in writing, which is in our minutes, but it's an inquiry, it should not have identifiable information. If it's advisories, thank you. So that's where I'm trying to figure out which packet this falls in. It's not
Rubber
a
meets the
complaint.
road?
So,
Yeah.
right now, it's set up so that names could be mentioned, and we would consider it so, as long as there would be no significant reputational damage. But the proposal now is to say, no, if, that no name will be mentioned, period.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, right? If we're gonna take these case by case, we can't litigate right now everything that possibly gonna happen. We might alter this if it turns into the people's court where somebody wants to just complain about somebody for no reason or whatever.
I think we have to keep in mind, though, what we're asking, or what we're offering here is to provide our opinion on a hypothetical.
Right?
And so, let's say somebody came in and said, hypothetically, the town clerk does this. Under, and they name the town clerk, hypothetically. Under a hard, fast, no identifying information, you couldn't discuss that issue. But what we're really trying to prevent is, as we talked about last time, is someone coming in here and using the written advisory opinion to try and sling mud, for lack of a better
Right.
phrase. And so I think that's the line.
Exactly. So, I think I'm okay with the way you wrote it now. I am, but this is a group.
So, let's take Elaine's example and make it a request for a written opinion. Okay? Person comes in, does not mention Elaine, does not
Eileen.
mention the ethics committee. I'm sorry. Eileen.
I know it.
And does not mention the ethics committee at all. and says, if a secretary to a board or committee, blah, 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 is that an unethical, is that action ethical? Okay, this is a request, this would be done, let's say, by the finance administrator with a question, okay? In her mind, it's clearly Eileen. But we don't know that,
Right,
and there's no information in the form which indicates that.
and there's no identifiable information.
Right.
So, and that's the thing, is that's clear, that's easy, right?
Right.
Because that's the same rule as this. But, Luke, were you the one who said a town, but not, or you could say, if you didn't say Naomi's name and you said hypothetically, our town clerk does blah, 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 we know who she is, but if you're saying hypothetically, process-wise, it's not
If,
necessarily
if a
targeting
town
her.
clerk were to do the following things, is that ethical? Now, that is a town clerk. Or even if our town, let's see,
If
does that?
Naomi, our town clerk,
She's the
or,
town
I'm sorry, not
administrator.
our town
Administrator.
administrator,
Maureen
excuse
is
me,
the town
Maureen,
clerk.
That's right.
whomever, if they add the name X afterwards, that doesn't necessarily, because
It's
again,
not.
it's a hypothetical, they're not, I don't wanna be the thought police here
Right.
on, and I don't wanna narrow it so much that people are afraid to use the system.
But couldn't we, right, like, so let's say somebody doesn't write it to the standard that we want it written.
Right.
Right? I would hope that we would get in non-public and say, well, we can't,
Yes,
we can't do this, but we could, the way that we could come out and talk about it is this.
We could,
We
yes.
could, report out in a washed
yep,
fashion, sanitize the information, to be able to report out our opinion without naming names or without besmirching characters or without, right? Like if somebody screwed up on the form and,
yeah. Yeah, I think,
Okay, the town clerk did X, Y, Z.
yeah,
Is that ethical? That's what they, and this is a request by, by someone in the town government,
sure.
another board member.
Yep.
Or maybe one of the clerks in the department.
sure.
Or one of her assistants. So it's a request for a written opinion. What would we do?
We could report out and say, we've been asked a general question about whether or not an elected official is able to engage in this behavior, that behavior, the other
Or
behavior.
we could even say, is the town clerk able to do this ethically?
Yeah, we could flip it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, in effect, we would rewrite the complaint, the request, so that we could respond consistent with our rules, even though the person inadvertently, presumably,
Yeah.
did not do that in the filling out the form.
I wouldn't, I think the part of it that we can manage is what our response is, right? So if we're looking at a form, we've opened it in non-public, we're looking at it, in reading through it, it's clear that, the intent was not pitchforks and torches in the parking lot, but that somebody was trying to get a question answered because they weren't sure. We could then read through that and I think report out, we've been asked a question about whether or not, a town clerk is able to do this and that
Right.
in their role.
right. And in reading
Or if
the
it's
original
ethical.
form where it says be specific as possible, in the original form, we can't ask people to be specific as possible and then yell at them for being too specific,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, I think that the catchphrase for the ethics committee is specifically vague,
specifically
so.
vague, exactly.
So,
Okay, so,
so what are you suggesting we should do with B?
It's hard for, because I always try to come at this as if I was the consumer, right? So I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, is there somewhere in this that we could break it out? And I think when we get to complaint, we're really clear,
Right,
right? And
right.
even when we were at like inquiry requests, we were really clear about how vague and how non-identifiable, that we should sort of break that out, like be as non-identifiable for these two types of products that you're trying to get from us. And then for the complaint, we need you to be real specific, right?
I would keep in mind that we shouldn't throw out the good enough for the perfect. that-
Yep.
that we're gonna have to probably modify these
Sure.
forms as time goes on and we
Yep.
have some experience. If we
Agreed.
run into problems, we have the power to modify the form in the future. It's not locked
Right.
in stone.
Yep.
But I think, you know, the first two, so in those, A and B, right? A and B are really, to me, very different than C.
Agreed.
And, I almost, like, you know, like when I look at what, you put together for the FAQ for, not to jump to another form, but I will. The individuals considering filing ethics complaint, you know, that's great information. I skimmed, but even just in looking at it, you know that it's substantially different than A and B here. Right? So I don't know if we just, take out C on the, and change this where ethics process for handling inquiries and advisory opinions and leave that to that, and then have complaints be sort of a separate packet so that it's a bit more clear. I know you were trying to be comprehensive, Neil, so that it was like one-stop shopping. You could be like, am I doing A, B, or C, you know? But it might, initially speaking anyway, be less confusing for folks. You know, I'm a visual person. I love a flow chart, you know,
Yeah,
so
I-
like, you know, I want like, I'm not sure I want to talk about this publicly. Here's your arrow, you know, like,
So what you're saying is we strike B
no.
and
I-
then cover B, we cover both the request for a written opinion and the inquiry the same under A.
I would even leave A and B and, you know, maybe put a little bit more content with it, but take C out and put C on the top of this. 'Cause it's a whole different kettle of fish.
But first of all, I thought that while this is a public document, this was really intended to guide us.
Right, so this is the process, so maybe we don't want to say what you're allowed to have in these documents, because that's an FAQ for the public. If this is our document.
This is our document.
All right, so then we want to say anything will come in by mail or in the Dropbox. I get it every week, and then,
Oh, I thought you were gonna put this out for, I thought this was a public-facing
it's a
document.
public-facing, but it's the process, our process for how we handle it.
Yeah,
So we
okay.
don't need to say what those different
My
documents are.
thought was that these two, which are supposed to be written in colloquial English
Yeah.
and understandable by everybody, would be what people would actually use.
Okay.
That was my thinking, and while anybody's going to, some are going to read this, this was really intended for us. This is how we're going to handle things.
I get it.
So maybe we shrink the language in ABC, because we know, and it's,
No, but we do know, but we haven't agreed, so we don't know yet.
We don't know.
well, but what the public puts in the document is not advice, it's not our process, that's already come to us. I mean, we could put in how we handle these documents. If it has identifiable information, we're going to weed it out in a non-public or genericize it. That's our process. It's not what they have to give us,
That's correct.
right? So.
So you were doing like a
So I. okay.
policy procedure document for us
Right.
Yes.
here,
So
okay?
you're
All
guiding
right,
us to
I'm with you
say,
now.
if it's anonymous, it doesn't affect people's opinions, we'll discuss it in public, otherwise, okay. And it's not telling them what to put in, it's like when we'll discuss it in non-public or public, that was your intent with this document.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
That makes sense. So,
So I wanted for us to have separate standards, or maybe the same standard,
Sure.
for EC Form C1, C2, and C3. I guess C3 is the complaint form. The complaint form. We haven't gotten there yet, but
Yeah.
presumably we're going to get there. So again, assuming we keep B for our information, and it's Form C2, this is the request for the written advisory opinion. The language, should the language be relate to an identifiable person or affect reputation?
I think if it's guiding us, affect reputation, right? Because,
So if somebody comes in with a written request for an advisory opinion and says, if the town clerk does this, we're okay. Okay? But if the form says, the town clerk did this, is this ethical? Bing, now we are into the inquiry.
Right.
yeah, complaint,
Okay.
right?
Yes, we will have to.
So, in effect, well, I don't know, I guess the same thing would be true for an inquiry. In an inquiry, why do we care if the town clerk is mentioned? As long as it's a hypothetical about the town clerk, not a specific complaint that the town clerk did something, it's an if.
Right, well, it's the difference between identifying the role and identifying the person, right, I think,
with the issue.
right?
But again, I would say that there's no harm in identifying people. The harm is when you identify them in such a way as
Right.
to, impugn their reputation.
And I really think, the rubber's gonna hit the road when we start getting some of these inquiries and we start
Right.
teasing out and making that. But I mean, I think with this in mind of how we handle things that come in, that helps. So then
And for all you've said, I still don't know where we are.
great, well, I don't want to, I'm trying to not dictate and have a discussion. I know where I sit now, but I wanna make sure everybody else.
Well, state your position.
Okay, so I feel like as written, that's fine. It's good. We don't need to change B. And then I think even leaving C in here, because this is telling us, based on which one, how we handle it, I'm okay with that all being one document because it's processed, but I'm one person.
So you're saying leave A as typed. We had proposed to make some changes. It's so that instead of affecting reputation, relates to an identifiable person.
I think because it's for us, we can tease that out, because I would hate to have something that we could, in non-public, say, we can twist this around and have a discussion. I'd hate to throw it out because they happen to write, Benji Knapp, when they were trying to describe something. We can take that out and still have a discussion, I think. Which is, I know I sound like I'm waffling, but,
No.
So when I'm sitting here trying to roll through like what it would be for process, right? So, and my brain might work slightly differently, but, I'm looking at, what are the 3 paths that we walk and how do we walk them? What are the steps? What's our checklist for each one, right? So all ethics stuff is gonna come in through, using one of the forms. They're gonna be dropped into potentially a Dropbox at the, town offices. The chair is gonna pick them up on a weekly basis. And then we get to A, which is the request for advice on, we get to A, which is ECC1, right? Which is, request for advisory, for advice and counsel, right? And so our process when we get a request for advice and counsel is to go
Right.
into non-public, open up correspondence, review the contents of correspondence, determine whether or not it meets this litmus test, right?
yep,
Make a decision on whether or not we can consider the inquiry. If we decide to consider the inquiry, we make a decision if it's going to go this way or that way. If we're going to be able to do it, make a decision in non-public and report that out, or we're going to go into public session because the content can be read into the record as written, and we're going to respond as such.
that is
Right,
the
so
process.
that's
Yes.
the process.
Yes,
And both of those will result in our opinion become part of the written record, okay? That's A. B, started out the same way. We went into non-public. We then looked at Form ECC2. determined that, we went through our litmus test, deciding that it wasn't going to significantly impact somebody's reputation. We then again, right, either accept or reject based on that criteria.
Or rewrite.
Or rewrite,
Yep.
and then roll through what the process would be to completion of B.
Right,
Then we get to C. C is a completely different ball of wax, right?
right.
Because we know that we have all of this to go to. But just for the purposes of trying to clear up A and B, from me looking at a process document, we would roll through soup to nuts of how that would look and what people can expect from us, what we can expect from each other, and how it works.
Okay, I'm filing I'm filing a C1, a request for advice and counsel. And I fill out the form in a way that the committee feels identifies a person or affects reputation.
Sure.
Now, this is the way the committee feels. I don't know this because I've just filed the form, okay? And then the committee says, okay, informs me that, or,
I can't inform you because it's.
right, it's anonymous. So the committee then hears this and discusses it in a way different from the way that I sent it in. And I'm pretty PO'd about this. Hey, I said it was Frank, and the committee never mentioned Frank. Are we creating a problem?
I don't think so. I feel like we're saying, we're gonna come out and we're gonna say of these 5 inquiries, we can handle 3, 2 are too identifiable and should be refiled as a complaint. Then so of those 3, one of them, we haven't read the words that they said. We should start that conversation saying we've reformed this in a way that has non-identifiable information. Like, we can start the conversation that way so that we're not saying,
Okay.
right, put it ahead of it before it becomes an issue. I would think we could manage that.
I would agree. I don't think we're creating a problem, because if they're that adamant, then they probably have a complaint, and that's what they should be filing. And so I think, if I were that person, if I was the person out there PO'd because the committee didn't address my particular issue, I would reapproach the committee in a way that identified myself and say, I'm not satisfied, and then we could take it up. But I don't see it as in the norm, in the vast majority of the cases we're likely to see, as being something that's gonna, upset the public or prevent them from being able to get their issues appropriately addressed, which is our end game.
Well, and I would imagine part of our process in making the decision to report it out in a way that protects, information, that we would be voting on whatever we determined in here in terms of wording anyway. That we would look at it and say, this is not specific enough, or this is too specific, or, that we'll really have to work to develop how we're going to be able to capture the essence of the complaint in such a way that doesn't make it completely like, you don't even know what you're talking about anymore, right? So, I'm at this point just looking at A and B, because
Yep.
that
That's all
for
we're looking
me,
at, yes.
that for me is, how we establish, this process. I think C is a whole other, like, that's a lengthy conversation in and of itself, but.
So, my
ahead.
conclusion from what you said
Yep.
is leave A and B as typed.
No.
No, I'm gonna, what I can propose to do, because I do this all day, is to try to map out some steps, full well knowing that this is a draft, this is
Okay.
an attempt at a draft, and that, we can then, once we have some of those steps, and it won't be in narrative form, Neil, it will probably be like A, B, C, D, E, F,
I'm sorry, I'm a little lost. You're talking about mapping out steps for A and B?
mapping out steps for A
Like,
and B
you know
of how
she spoke and
the
she
flow.
described a process. This doesn't describe a process, really. It mostly describes a condition on whether we'll do something. So when you were talking, I saw a flow chart.
Yes,
right?
that's
It's very
what-
much- Right, so it's if this, then this, we do this, then this, and if this,
Yes.
if we hit this criteria, then we're gonna reword, like.
Yep.
And it gives a script to the new ethics committee after we're gone to know how they handle it,
Sort of like a decision tree.
right?
So,
Okay.
so just from the perspective of that, we know what we're doing, right? Step A, step B, I'm not gonna say A, B, and C, because it's A, B, and C here, but step 1, step 2, step 1 is pretty clear, we get stuff from people, right? We get stuff from people and we go in and public to open it. That's a pretty
Okay.
easy one.
You've got the changes that are to be made to 1 and the changes to be made, well, just take the man off chair for 2, and then you're going to redo the rest.
I'm gonna,
Redo A and B.
I'm gonna redo A and B.
Okay.
From a very rudimentary framework.
Okay. Can we go back just for a second to the inquiry request form? Can we get rid of the word inquiry? Because it's
No,
duplicative.
because the inquiry was on the process document that was voted on by the town, right? I think that's why we added it in there. You didn't have it, and we added it
It's not redundant?
because it's the key word that was used by what the town voted on.
Complaints,
No. Inquiries, see, inquiries in section C,
right?
right? So we put inquiry on it because that's what it's called. We have inquiries and we have complaints.
Then do we want to say an inquiry request for a written advisory opinion?
You're right, I think it would be more clear, because when we brought this up, I'm still saying, is this an inquiry or is it a complaint? But if it's gonna be an inquiry, probably should say that.
Well, I think the distinction is whether or not a written request is in order, because we could give a verbal, on the scenario under A, we could just say, in the meeting, in the public session, yes, no, otherwise. The difference is that one of them requires a written request, one of them does not.
But they're both inquiries.
But they're both inquiries. It's a fair point.
Just for my own clarity, like, when I look for somebody giving me an opinion, right, it's yes or no, right? Like, yes, this is an ethical violation, no, this isn't an ethical violation. When I look at written opinion, it's like what was the basis or foundation of the decision-making that you used to come to this conclusion? Like, what led you to think that this was ethical or unethical? I may be looking at that the wrong way, but that's the substantial difference to me. Like, I don't care why you think that, just yes or no. I don't,
So you expect that we're going to have this discussion in public on C1 and just say yes or no? And the minutes is just going to say yes or no?
It could be, but
Could be, but I
so do you
Like
want to
it's black and
do,
white.
do you want to do for every single one that comes in, like the full, like, this is why we felt this way, or this is why we didn't feel this way? Like, would we do that for every single one that
I
would
don't
come in?
think so. I don't think so. I think, again, that's the distinction is, if they're asking for a written request, that is a more formal process than just an advisory. Now, we have to also remember that we're making these determinations based solely on the information we're being
Yes.
provided.
Yep.
And in A, I suspect that the bar is gonna be lower, and we would caveat whatever we said, specifically by saying, based
disclaimer?
on the
Yeah.
information we've
Yeah.
received
Yes.
only, and this
Yeah.
is not a universal position. On B, if we're writing a written one, to your point, writing holds more weight and lasts longer, and we would have to obviously spend more time considering the thoroughness of the response, but you could have a written response that says, yes.
As a practical matter, if we're having a discussion, this is under A, okay? And the discussion, of course, will first be to elicit the facts so we can understand what is actually happening. So we come to some conclusions that A, B, and C occurred. I can't think that our minutes are going to say we find this to be an ethical complaint an ethical violation of section whatever it is, period.
Well, for an inquiry, we're not gonna have a finding. We're gonna say, right, if the question is, does it seem like ethical behavior? We have the wording that Luke just
But-
said, based on what we have.
But the opinion is going to be recorded in the minutes. So Eileen is going to write something, and she's going to write the facts, and then she's going to have a simple sentence which says, this is or is not an ethical violation of section, whatever it is. I just don't see that happening. I don't think we're capable of doing that. I mean, we're capable, but I mean, I would feel I wasn't doing what I needed to do if I just said yes or no and didn't give reasons
So
in
you
supporting.
want to do the thing that I'm talking about, the second thing, which is, you know, the vote was, you know, 4-1, right? The reasons that the 4 said, yes, it was an ethical violation, or this, that, and the other. The one who dissented said, it was not an ethical violation because of this and that.
It depends, though. I mean, if somebody says, if the town clerk shot my dog, is that ethical? That's a simple yes or no. You don't have to go into case law. It's saying it's not an ethical thing, it's a.
Was the dog attacking them?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean, so to the point, there is no solid, it's an individual answer.
Correct.
But I think what we need to stay focused on is the difference between a request for advice, which is really amorphous, really broad, undefined, and a written response
Correct.
for, that would be more particular to the information. So I think, first off, my understanding of the requirement under the RSA for minutes is we don't have to say anything. We can say the issue was discussed.
You're correct.
Yes.
So there's no requirement for us to put all of that background decision-making. The committee discussed the, you know, and that's it.
So then in A, where it says, and the committee's opinion recorded in the minutes should be deleted.
Well, she's rewriting that whole section. right?
No.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that it's necessary to say that the opinion of the committee has to be recorded in the minutes, because then you get into
A written opinion.
the written opinion, and that's not what the purpose of that is.
So if I send one and I want to know,
You can watch
If-
the
if
I'm
YouTube.
going to
you-
watch the videotape.
If you weren't here in
Yep.
the audience or didn't watch it, the way we're talking now, you don't get a response, because nothing will be in the minutes other than saying, we discussed a complaint that involved the town, yes, a particular issue.
But we had also talked about, and maybe I'm not remembering this correctly, but we had also talked about that one of the value adds, and trust me, I'm the one writing the minutes, so, you know, less is always more, but the value add would be to have a canon, right? Like to have some record that somebody else could go to. You know, like, so the ethical issue was conflict of interest. You know,
So you might write, in this situation, the board felt that there was a conflict of interest, period. That's the yes or the no.
I think the difference is between the shall and could, right? If we're saying you have to write the results in the minutes, then you don't have a choice. But to educate, to have things, if we discuss it, and we say, you know, we probably should put this one in, we have that flexibility.
yeah, you know, so you're saying not shall, you're saying may.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to, you know, the reason that we had talked about the written advisory opinion and using the minutes was because of the anonymity or confidentiality. We were trying to find a means of communication where we could provide a written advisory opinion without having to know the parties.
Right, because once we write a written document and we hand it to someone with all that specific stuff,
Yes.
it's a public document,
That
right?
was,
So-
I think that was why we had decided that the minutes could be a place where you could get it in writing. That, you know, for B, right? For the purposes of B. when I look at A, right, I look at slightly differently. We could probably use the same process. But it wouldn't mean that we would necessarily have to.
Right, so May,
May,
yeah,
is that,
May works.
it works for me.
because for B, we need to provide a
Correct.
portal for written information someplace, because that's the request and that's the basis of the warrant, right?
Yes,
So, yeah,
So in A, you're saying.
we might.
That, with the inquirer present, if he or she so wishes, and the committee's opinion may be recorded in the minutes.
yeah, but because she's gonna turn this into a process, that a lot of the wording may change completely,
Okay, good,
yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, like, I'm trying to think here, because we had such rich discussion at the last meeting. I probably should have watched the video before. But that was the why,
Yes,
correct?
exactly.
Okay.
Yep, that you perfectly remembered that, based on how I remember it. So you're gonna reword section 2 for A and B, because we know the process, you just wanna put it in more of a process checklist form, or a,
Yeah.
that would be help, that's how my brain works as well. So have it, once I start seeing a big paragraph after, and I do this with email too, after about the third or fourth line, I start saying wah, 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 wah. It's short and concise, and it's like, okay, I go here.
Usually when, I spent the whole day looking at policy and procedure documents, and, like usually you'll have the purpose, so the intent, right? Like, and what you're trying to achieve, and then the steps, so that we remain,
Consistent.
consistent
Yeah.
and faithful to this. And, again, we could change the steps. We could get,
Sure.
2 sessions into this and be like, yeah, this isn't
Mm-hmm.
functionally working. We keep getting stuck here, or this seems to be a log jam, or,
Correct.
but for a working document, to be able to rein us in, I think it might be helpful.
I think it would be great, especially as we start going through this, to pull us back into the process instead of. Okay. So, and then we will not, we're tabling the complaint pieces till we get through.
Are we?
I think, well, and I didn't really get a chance to look at the complaint process. I mean, like, we need to talk about like hearings and
Right.
information
But
gathering.
again, this
and-
is our process document. I thought that the proposal was potentially to remove C from this document and host it somewhere else. Is that,
Well, see, when we, this will be, what I create will be our
Right,
committee
understand.
roadmap, right? And C will be a part of that.
okay.
Because
That's-
it,
That was gonna be my point, is if it's our process,
Yes.
it all needs to be in one place.
I originally understood that this document was a public-facing
I
document
see.
for other people to
guidance
figure
for
out.
them, not
Yes,
guidance for
not
us.
for us. I didn't understand that initially.
Okay.
So that took me a hot second to get in that
Okay.
page.
One issue under B, under A and B, I guess. A says, with the inquirer present if he or she wishes. It's anonymous.
But they can be here to hear it live.
Well, after the fact, right? Like, if we go back, because we're in non-public when it all starts, right?
Right.
So, once we get to the place where we can go back into public session, yeah, we would open the door, invite anybody who wanted to come in, even if you didn't have anything to do on a Wednesday
Right.
night, whether you submitted something or not.
Is it mandatory that A and B, that it be anonymous? Because we're saying it's anonymous, but that's only for the protection of the individual filing it. If they so choose, and I think we should provide them with the
Sure.
opportunity to
Absolutely.
identify themselves, and this goes back to the form too. If they identify themselves, then they could come to the meeting and engage in a discussion.
Oh, okay. So
Right.
they can come to the meeting even if it's
Right, they-
anonymous, right?
right, they could,
So
but-
what you're adding in is a process whereby they can have a discussion with us, and I think we tabled that last time, because we can't control if they go into complaint space.
Well, we still have the ability to control the public discussion. We can shut down, if somebody's out of order or whatever, we could take care of that. But what I'm suggesting is there's two classes of folks under A and B. Those who care about whether or not they're identified and those that don't. I'm talking about the complainant, not the person, the subject of the complaint.
Sure.
So for those people who are, for example, under A, where they're asking for advice, it would be very helpful to have a dialogue to narrow the scope so that we're not, way off base when we're making the call based on only this one paragraph of information that we had. So I would encourage people who are looking for advice to come in and discuss it with us so that we have a full picture and we can give them more helpful advice. On the other hand, providing the opportunity, should they feel the need to be anonymous, perfectly okay. But people have to understand that when you in our public world, and this is all public, when you decide that you're going to be anonymous, that limits your ability to engage, and it limits the ability of the people you're asking to engage with you. So, again, I think that it's not all anonymous.
Should be optional.
It should be optional for them, but somehow in your process, they need to understand that yes, you can choose to be anonymous, but you have to understand what that means is we can't respond to you directly if you're anonymous, because we don't know who you are.
And I agree with that. I'm walking through the other part of that, which is, without 360, which is the complaint process, I feel like we're still limited in what we can say back about, yeah, you're right. That was absolutely, an ethical violation, because we only have one perspective, right? So even if somebody paints me the most compelling picture you've ever heard, without the other side of the story, I still am very limited. They can come in and talk to us. I would be concerned about that, not about them coming in and talking in a non-public. I have no problem with somebody coming in and talking in a non-public session about their, concern. I would be concerned about our ability to curtail, somebody throwing somebody else under the bus publicly in a public venue. Not that anybody has the ability.
How would that differ from anyone just coming in here, asking to address the committee, and then doing so?
We haven't had a policy whereby the public can do that yet.
Public comment, or,
We don't have to have a public comment.
understand?
Yeah.
Technical question, Beth. Is it possible to turn off that mic at the dais?
Yeah, disconnect it.
No, there's no throw switch, kill switch that you have,
No,
and there's nothing that the chair has here.
no.
Could that be put in?
I'm sure you could just,
No, without walking over there.
oh,
Yeah, mute button, so if
Oh, what do you
somebody
mean,
says
like
something-
muting them from afar?
We
Yep.
can mute YouTube, we can't mute
Yep.
the room.
Yeah. It's an interesting challenge, because again, I like public discourse, obviously, right? I've spent my whole life doing it, but, I don't know how to do what is being proposed in such a way that can still protect somebody, I don't know. I have to chew on that. Like, I just don't know how we would do it and
Well-
operationalize it. I don't know.
Agree that there will always be the opportunity for malicious behavior.
Yeah, uh-huh,
And there's no way for us to prevent all of that.
yeah.
I think that the reality is, to Neil's point, even if there was a microphone switch, people can be loud enough to be picked up on the other microphones. If somebody's out of order or out of control, the chair would suspend the meeting and do what they got to do to take care of that situation.
Let me ask Beth a question. Beth, if I flick this switch down, what happens?
all the microphones go down.
Oh.
Including that one?
Oh, well, that does it.
But as I'm speaking in the back here right now, you can hear me on the,
On,
I don't have a microphone, but you can hear me.
on YouTube?
If we shut off that switch,
Yeah, she still has a microphone on her laptop, right?
So,
I'm
can
sorry.
you shut off YouTube? Okay.
Okay.
end stream. One button. It's the fastest way to do it.
So we do have the ability
Okay.
to silence the room.
Wendy's trying to decide.
Well, I'm very processed, like I'm
Yeah.
flow chart, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going, okay, if we're going to have anyone in the public who hasn't given us a form, or who has given us a form and somehow intended that they want to talk to us, we're saying, if we've decided it's a conversation we can have in public, and the person is here and wants to be heard, we're going to have a whole discussion before we discuss. I'm just trying to figure out how that
The flow,
works.
right?
Yeah.
Do we like say, okay, yeah, come on in, talk to us, we're gonna go back into non-public? Are we going back and forth? Because we would not have yet made a decision at that point, right? So,
Well, we'd been in non-public, we decided, we think we can discuss this one publicly,
yeah,
but there's an indication that person will be here and they want to talk to us.
I'd pull them into non-public
Why?
for them to present whatever they feel they need to regarding their complaint or their inquiry.
But they've given us a written inquiry, right?
They've given
This
us
is
an
not
inquiry
somebody-
form, yep.
Yeah, we have the form, we've considered that in non-public, and we have determined that this is something we can discuss. Let's assume this person did not request anonymity, because we were talking about that.
Yeah.
So the person knows that we're going to be, if we're going to be able to consider, we're going to do it at the meeting of a particular date, the person is here. We bring up the matter, and person goes to the microphone, and presumably, the chair can control this. The chair can ask the person to restate the case, or simply have a discussion among ourselves and then recognize the person to raise additional questions or answer questions from us. It's really up to the chair as to what would happen in the public session. And if the complainant or the inquirer went off the rails, as we've been using that term, then the chair could deal with that also.
Well, right, so off the rails is an easy one, right? Well, it's not an easy one, I've had many off the rails in school board days. I think that my concern, one of the things we had talked about last time was people aren't professional case law people who have written something in a way that is completely anonymous. And so by controlling the dialogue, controlling what we were discussing, we could do some of that, meeting the case law without calling out somebody. Once you give someone, right, and they might absolutely not be malicious, but they're not lawyers, right? So could they then start with, when this person's cousin's wife did this, and hypothetically, and it slides into the identifying information, it's already on YouTube. We don't have a 10-second delay, right? It's already out there, so we haven't been able to control it. And it's this is a group discussion. If we want to just try that and then pull it back when we realize that was bad, then that's fine. It's
So I have a counter to
Yeah,
that, and that
yeah.
is that some people don't communicate well in writing. I've been
True.
in many cases,
Yeah.
many hearings where, they just can't get it into but they can tell you about their story.
sure.
And the ability to have some interrogatory where you're going back and forth really helps define what question are you asking.
Right.
And during that process, if it becomes apparent that, it's inappropriate, that's when we can say, okay, this is not the forum for that, and then handle it from there. I don't want to limit in saying that the only way you can do this is, this number of lines and that's it. and-
Sure. But so then that's kind of why I was thinking non-public with those people, because we can have that conversation, tease out what we want to discuss in public, but it seems like there's some concern that if we did that in non-public, we would not be transparent. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know that I agree with that last part.
Okay.
I think that there may be a way, if they, first off, this goes back to the identifying, you have to know who they are to have them in the non-public, right? So if they choose to identify themselves and request further discussion, or the board, after reviewing it initially, so let's say we're in non-public and we say, we don't have enough information here, but we know who this is, we could then invite them if that were appropriate, to come in and clarify, or whatever.
But isn't that a complaint at that point?
Not necessarily, not necessarily. If it's an inquiry about, you know, I don't understand this number 3 on the ethics rules, and I want to know if, under this scenario, would this be a violation? That's not a complaint, that's, you know, grappling with what are the rules? And I think that's different. I think if we get to the point where they're saying, but again, this person,
That's like giving person 2 bites at the apple. Once they do this, they find out the committee's opinion, then they go for a formal complaint.
of course, and that's kind of the purpose, isn't it? If they're asking us questions about something and then we say, yes, that would be a violation, the obvious next step for them is to file a complaint.
Yes, but if it's done in the way that we're talking about, so that reputations, and people are not identified, reputations are not affected, if they want to then go for a complaint, that's fine, but should they really be able to, as in your scenario, actually have the person named in non-public, and the particulars done? So,
Again, what we're,
am I misunderstanding?
I think you are, because I'm not, my understanding is, on the inquiry or advisory, what we're talking about is hypothetical, not a, you know, or generic, if you will, not a, this person did this thing to me and I want to know if you think that's a violation.
But that's exactly what I thought you said was going to happen in non-public.
I don't think so. That wasn't my
I
intention.
think what I heard you say is not everyone is a writer.
Right.
Some people can better explain what they're asking
The
verbally.
question. Right, so all I'm suggesting is I'm not opposed to giving people the opportunity to have a discussion with the committee on on understanding more about what the rules are, what the guardrails are. If somebody comes in here and, you know, as we've discussed many times now, is really trying to subvert the process in a way that they can get their mud on the wall quickly, well, that's an opportunity to head it off, but we're gonna, I struggle with how many bulwarks we're creating here for scenarios that will likely never
Happen, right.
materialize.
Sure, and you know, like the piece of this that then I start thinking about, right, is, so now we've had this interactive process, and we've received a body of evidence, if you will, right, from one directional question. And the person then moves to a complaint, right? So does that mean in our, I know I'm jumping the gun, but in our complaint and hearing process, that person then gets a second hearing, so to speak, when we then go to get the other side of the story? Like, how does that impact the other process?
Right. I would
Does
think
it-
if we're doing say a non-public discussion to understand what they're asking, as soon as it starts going into a complaint, then we say, this really seems like a complaint, and we stop it, and not get all the body of evidence.
Right, because to me, it could,
But I actually, I'm looking at it from the other side, because I don't think it gives them 2 bites at the apple. I think they're separate apples. I think one of them is, you're asking a generic question about a hypothetical situation, or an obscured situation, and obviously, and we would have that caveat up front, we're only hearing one side of the story.
Sure.
When they move to a complaint, well, that opens up the whole second side of the story, and certainly some of their information is gonna be modified by that other information, you know? So I don't see it as 2 bites at the apple. I don't see them, you know, getting anything, like, in an inquiry, we wouldn't say, absolutely, that's, you know, that's, I mean, we would be, in my opinion, remiss if we were to come out and down hard and say, absolutely, that's an ethical violation. And, you know, it's like, well, it doesn't sound, you know, it sounds like,
Sounds
based
like
on what
there's
you're saying.
Potential for something based
Right.
on what you've said.
And the step process too, it remains consistent, so that way it leads them to that path if that's where it's going.
Right.
I think we would just have to identify what's the threshold and where you would stop it,
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Yep.
That's gonna be a moving target.
That's why they pay us the big bucks. Oh, wait.
Apology.
No, but I think, I do think, I think we need we need to agree amongst ourselves, maybe not right now, but where we think that is. Because some people will inadvertently say someone's name in non-public, and we'll go, okay, I know who you're talking about, but we need to go back, and we can guide them back in. But as soon as they go to this person whose business is this, who did this, and then that happened, and then the garage was 2 feet too close to the road, and then they've made a whole case. We have to figure out where we can pull it back, and when and that's gonna be a trick, right? Is when have they started to go into that line, and
When they're asking for advice or information
Exactly.
versus a judgment.
right? And so, I'm gonna need everyone, like, that shouldn't just come from me saying, nope, that's too long. I think we need a way that any of us can go, have a concern that we're starting to slide into this, and,
The ability to be able to speak out on that.
yeah,
Agreed.
yeah.
Yes.
And then we can have a discussion, even with or without that person in the room, about, I think we're starting to go that way. It needs to be a complaint.
Right.
And procedurally, right, like, I mean, I highly doubt we'd, have so many that we wouldn't be able to get them, all managed in one night, but,
Yep.
Procedurally, if that is the path, then, somebody's there the night that they think it's gonna happen, right, like, and it doesn't happen that night, and it's 2 weeks out, and then, they're like, well, I'm not gonna be here next time, and I want, like, there's that, how do we manage that part of it? Just as an aside, like,
I would say the same way any committee does on any of these matters. Somebody's coming before the selectmen, for example, and they don't get to it because other business is more pressing.
Sure.
They had a non-public session that took up way longer than they thought, and the person had to leave, then they come to the next meeting. That's,
And if they can't come to the next meeting because they're vacationing in Maine, say,
right.
then we could table it until they come back, right?
I think we're flexible enough to adapt.
I think.
It's called accommodating.
Go, yeah.
are we gonna have a set meetings? Like, we never talked about that
A
part
set meeting
either.
time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, we had talked about sort of, whether or not we were gonna have like a once a month-ish meeting, if we were gonna, how we were gonna roll through that
Right.
part.
I think for the foreseeable future, we have the first, third, and fourth Wednesdays, right? And if we start going along and we have no mail, so maybe that's a reason to check the mail on Mondays. We have nothing to talk about this week, then we don't have to meet, I think. I don't know, what are your thoughts? Should we?
There was a question, or,
I just wanted to say, I think there's a delay in
Okay.
recording.
Okay.
So can we just do a test? Could you just stand up for a second? You're still sitting, you're still sitting. It's a long delay.
Okay.
You're still sitting. So we have enough time if something.
To
if
shut it
someone's
down?
buoy, you can shut it down.
Okay, so it's like a
So
10
I wonder
second
when it would catch it. Like, would it catch it immediately, Beth?
She's still sitting down.
Holy, that's not good.
Oh, she just stood up.
Wow, okay. I feel a lot better.
About 30 seconds probably.
Yeah, I feel better.
Yeah, so we could stop, but,
To tell
so
someone
if
to
you
stop it.
Yeah.
so there's a 30-second delay. If you kill the stream, you're not playing what we said, you're stopping from that moment.
Correct.
Okay.
But then we have like a sort of an issue, right? Because then we gotta go back to live stream. We go back to live stream and say, for the, well, but even like, for the people watching at home, information was revealed in a public setting that we deemed would be, deleterious to the, fabric of our community, and so we stopped,
Or we can go simple and say, we just had some technical difficulties, we'll be back momentarily.
So if we go that route, and I mean, that makes it better if we're gonna have
Yep.
public discourse, but we need to test that when she kills it, that you never see me dancing, which is what I was doing in that delayed 30 seconds, right? That would never come up because it cut it
Right, when-
where we were live, as opposed to it takes 30 seconds to upload to YouTube and then come back down. So we'll have to do a little experiment.
Neil is chewing on this. I can feel the wood burning from here.
I'm concerned, as you are, about what happens when we resume.
Yeah.
Does it just upload from where it left off, or does it skip?
Don't know, but
No, when you hit end stream, we have to go through the whole process again. You know how when the meeting starts, it takes a second for Naomi to get it going?
So,
Once you
okay.
hit end stream, you gotta go back and do that whole process.
Okay, so it terminates and then reboots it wherever you start over.
Well, we'll try it again next meeting. After
Yeah.
we adjourn, I'm just gonna, and then you guys do something.
Yep,
you know,
perfect.
Stand up, sit down, whatever.
Well,
Sure it's not.
we'll say, okay, let's
Test.
see if this happens, and then you hit kill. And then that last 10 seconds, did it get cut off or
After
not?
we adjourn, we'll just.
And
you know,
poor
finish
Doug
it.
is gonna be like, what happened?
You know, 15 minutes of a meeting, but it lasts 2 hours.
Okay, so,
Lasted till the rescue.
so we're saying if people want to identify themselves, they can come to the next meeting, and then from a process, are we saying we'll bring them into non-public to get clarifying questions? Are we saying we're gonna try to do it in public and see what happens and maybe use a kill switch? I think that's the discussion.
I think A is much easier to do just publicly. B is closer to the line.
we made some decisions on C1 with respect to anonymity, which we're now thinking of changing.
No. Well, you still, the default is
Keeping it
anonymous,
optional.
but making an option if someone
But-
wants to, yes.
Exactly, and that needs, so some language change needs to be made to the form to reflect that.
Right,
To have a place to put a name.
right,
I'm talking about this form,
yep.
and then obviously this.
So so I guess the first discussion is, do we want to have the optional way to identify themselves? We need to vote or nod or something to decide that's what we want to do.
If, the way we've discussed, the way we've set it up now, there can be no interactive advice and counsel.
Right,
As a practical matter. Okay. If we want to give that option to people, then they have to come in and make their request publicly.
that's
So-
the question.
And so the choice would be for the inquirer. Do you want this to be an anonymous inquiry, or do you want this to be a public inquiry? If it's an anonymous inquiry, the board will consider it in public session, and you may hear the discussion, and it may be in the minutes. If you choose to have make your inquiry public, then you will have an opportunity to appear before the board and ask them further questions or hear their discussion.
But I guess the nuance for me is if they're okay with their name being out there, but do we want to have that conversation in non-public, the clarifying piece, and then we have our discussion once we have that clarifying piece public? You're advocating that the entire thing is public.
I am, because I don't see how we can go into non-public for clarification unless there's a particular issue that is actually facing us.
Right.
So if they come in and don't mention Joe's name, we have no legal basis to go into non-public.
Okay.
If they come in and start going off the rails, as we've been using that expression, then we do have a basis to go into non-public.
Yep.
And we can, or you could, what I would
I
do
would
as chair
end it
is to
and
say,
say, "That's a
wait,
complaint."
stop.
Yep.
Please, if you cannot mention
Yep.
specific names or whatever it is,
Yep.
and if that's absolutely essential for you, then we'll have to go into non-public to,
No, if it's absolutely essential that they have to name someone, at that point, it's a
Wait.
complaint, right?
yeah, okay, you're right.
So the only caveat to what you had just run through is that, you know, you have the option of identifying yourself. You don't have the option of naming the other party.
Correct.
Right.
You know, and so really driving that point home. Like, if you want to be here, if you want to discuss this with us, if you want to,
Hypothetical or generic?
yes, you have to do that in a
Still non-
non-identifiable manner. Any move from that
But to Neil's point, we do have to modify the forms to allow, to have a name
Yep.
option, and then just put next to it,
Or,
optional.
yeah,
Right.
However, a little
Okay,
statement that
I will take it upon myself to try to
what
revise
you
this,
just said was perfect, if you can remember.
to
that.
rise, to try to reflect that in here
yeah. we-
without, and I'll send that to you.
Yes, but the only thing I do want to say to you is we still have to go into non-public to open them.
Absolutely.
We don't know what
course.
we're opening until we get them open.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
And if we open one and it has someone's name, because we're gonna need to know who to call,
Yep.
right? And it has their name on it, and we go, ooh, this is really a complaint, we can still say, we received your concern, at this point, it sounds like a complaint. If you have a chance to rephrase it generically, we could have that discussion, but
Sure.
not have them repeat something that's really a complaint,
And
yeah.
if it is a complaint, this is the path.
Right,
Here's the form, right?
okay,
Right.
okay. So no non-public discussion, clarification, we'll just do it publicly. And then hit the kill switch if we need to. Yeah.
If I could just add, I think for Neil's assignment, that same would be on this form as well, right? That the advisory opinion is also anonymous? Or is that, no, their
No,
name is on
it's-
that, disregard,
yeah.
disregard.
No, the written one has a higher standard, right? What is your provision of the
Right.
ethic code?
I
what's
saw your name
position,
just
and-
as soon as I said that.
Yeah. Okay,
Are we on C?
so we're all good with the inquiry and the written process? You're gonna take a stab at the process?
I'm gonna wait for Neil. He's
Okay.
gonna send me something, and then based on that, I'm gonna,
Well, the only thing so far that I'm sending you is a revised
Yeah.
of this.
Yep.
Okay.
And then you'll write up the process.
I will codify the process-ish.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Love it. All right, so then do we want to start looking at the process for C? Or do we want to, there's one of these forms about, oh wait, did you get rid of the hearing document? Hearing documents.
This one?
Yeah, the rules.
This,
regarding conduct.
this is not,
Nope.
oh, I don't believe I changed this. This was
Okay.
something that the original committee did.
Okay,
And I just put this in here because I think
Yeah.
we need to look at it.
Right.
It's one of their documents, and
So we
either
should-
we're going to re-adopt it or revise it.
I'm sorry, what document are we
rules
referencing?
regarding the conduct of hearings.
Ah, okay.
And I would suggest that we not look at this now.
Okay.
It's a totally new subject. Let's get the other things figured out. This really, maybe it's for Eileen, I'm not sure, but this relates specifically to C, to.
Correct. So the question is, do we go to C now that we've done A and B, or do we want to not touch anything complaints and work on the other documents?
Well, I think we can, my position would be, I think we can make it through what's here on C, although I think we will probably end up doing a flow chart for that as well, and rather than come back another week and do another flow chart, I
Right.
think maybe we could get through it.
See if this process from a high level makes
Right.
sense, and then move forward based on what we decide. That sound good?
Which one are we starting with? Are we starting with the complaint form?
No, we're keeping with the process for handling inquiries and going to section C.
Okay.
And just high level, this is what we identified as a process. And then C, before we deep dive in some of the other documents, that sound good?
I have a question. So you can only bring something in the past year? I didn't,
That's my,
no,
I
I
have notes
just,
on
I
this.
just read, I just read that. So, is it in
This-
someplace?
No, this is what was adopted by the advisor, by the original committee.
Okay.
Okay.
so the only notes I have on C, if we're talking about C now, relates specifically to that.
Okay.
And so my bias would be to modify that language such that whatever your period is, if it's 90 days, 6 months, a year, whatever, it's a year from the date of the alleged infraction or from the time that the complainant could reasonably have been expected to be aware of it. That's language
Okay.
that we,
So that process document that you got, the original one, was that voted on by the town or no?
This?
The one that says.
The
one that-
rules?
Yeah, the one that says inquiries and, nope. There's too many documents. The one that had the inquiries in bold, this one right here. this, where ethics,
That was adopted by the town.
so we can't change,
That you cannot change.
So is the
Yeah.
year in there?
I'm just checking. I didn't remember it was, but I don't.
All here for you, such a complaints in writing, signing complaint, certified code of ethics, fear inquiry, any official board, copy the complaint.
I don't see it.
Nope,
I didn't see it in anything except these forms that came up, the year, it's repeated several places.
yep, all right, so if it's, but was voted on, the town doesn't say that, we can amend, right? All right, so your wording,
My wording would be, a year, or within a year of when the complainant might reasonably have been expected to become aware of the concern.
Which document are you reading from?
no, he's.
Hold it up.
I'm reading from my notes, but I'm on the Ware
Section
Ethics
C.
Committee Process Document C, and what I'm referencing here specifically, Neil, is where it says,
Right.
occurred within a year before the date of the complaint. First sentence?
Yep.
Last few words. So all I'm suggesting is that you say within a year, or with it, whatever your time frame is, or when the person could because of course, somebody could have done something unethical, but you're not aware of it, and then a year and a day has passed, and now you've lost any right to raise the issue. But you just learned that it happened. So, I mean, you could also change your date to when does, well, not really, because it's when, you're using the violation date.
Yeah, it's hard to police when someone was made aware of something.
Well, I
though,
understand,
right?
and this language specifically is taken out of contracts that I worked with for 20
Okay,
years,
okay.
and the reason we had that there is because a lot of times people aren't even aware something's happened, but you have to have when they could reasonably have been expected to be aware, and then that's when the board or the hearing decides, because some people will say, well, for example, we used to have a lot of complaints about, I didn't get paid appropriately. Right, but it's 6 months down the road, and the contract says 90 days you have to file a grievance, right? Well, 6 months down the road, they say, well, I just discovered I didn't get paid. Well, you gotta leave an earnings statement every 2 weeks,
Right,
so therefore
right.
you could reasonably have been expected to be aware of it. It's not our fault you didn't look at your documents. On the other hand, if someone has an issue where they had no knowledge of it and could not reasonably have known the event happened, should they be precluded from filing a complaint simply because the calendar has moved on and now they just found out about it?
But if they're complaining about some person, so say I never go to a fire wards meeting, right? And then I find out the fire wards did something, how would I know?
That's different because they reasonably could have been expected to, because it would have been publicly available on the minutes or on the video or something like that.
So we could say it was there, you chose not to watch
Or,
it.
or you, yes, you not chose, there was an opportunity for you to be aware. But in some cases, there's no such opportunity if
So-
on ethics, because you're generally not speaking, well, I won't say that.
Evelyn Connor was town clerk some time ago. Some incident, I'm making this up. This is
Understand.
absolutely hypothetical.
Hypothetical.
Some incident happened during her tenure. And I just discovered it
Today.
today, okay? And I want to file a complaint against Evelyn.
That
It's
would
no
be,
longer here.
yeah, who's no.
Not only
longer-
is she not here, but it's 10 years ago.
Right.
But under your standard, a reasonable person could not have found out about it until today, when the Attorney General investigated something and came up with something. Or there was a story in the newspaper or something like that.
I think the board would have to make a call in that case.
Okay.
It would be a rare exception. In my experience with hundreds and hundreds of cases, it is very, very rare that somebody can say, I had no ability to know that this thing happened.
Okay.
The only thing that I would say about the year at this particular point, and it actually is a point of clarity around our process, is that according to the warrant, when the warrant was voted on, the town approved it. The moderator at that time could have sat in ethics committee. And
I'm sorry, say that?
could have sat in ethics committee. It was written into the process that that moderator could appoint people to act as
Oh.
ethics committee. That didn't happen for whatever reason, and then we went to election just this past March, and we were sat, right? So the statute of limitations of a year for anybody who's been sitting on an ethics complaint waiting since we voted this in 2 town meetings ago, doesn't seem fair to me. I probably would expand it a little bit to try to kind of make up for that happening.
So, I have a different understanding. My understanding was that the moderator could appoint until the election. That it was
So once,
to-
yes, so once the town voted yes, the moderator could appoint
Until the next
for the,
spring.
until the next town meeting. So
Right.
there could have been a working ethics committee, is my point,
For a year.
2 town meetings ago. From that, put into place from the action of that town meeting, could have gone to appoint a committee. They would have then gone to election the next year.
I don't think I agree. I think, the Ethics Committee, as I understand it, was originally established in 2006.
But when we put it back on the warrant, there was a process.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The town,
Yes.
the moderator could have, a year ago, put
Yes.
people on there. Okay, but
Yes.
they didn't.
He
Right.
didn't, and
So-
so then it went to election, we were all elected, and it's taken us this time
All right.
to be able to create a framework, so I'm saying the year right now doesn't necessarily seem
Right.
fair to me, because
If
it's
the
the
town voted this
committees.
in because they had a burning issue.
Yeah.
We've now obsoleted it by at least,
Year and a half.
yeah. And then we say, well, sorry, I know you
Yeah,
were really
2
upset
years.
about something, which is why you
Yes.
voted on it, but it's too
Yeah,
late.
it's, here's your year window, it's,
Yeah,
it's been
there's
eclipsed
a
because of our
balance.
process. So I would say
3 years?
3 years is a great, way to do it, just as a makeup point.
I'm okay with that. I'm just, that's,
One of the problems for having these cutoff dates is that especially if it's a complaint, memories fade, people aren't around.
Yep.
So you find yourself in a difficult position where you can't determine what the facts are.
I think that, to start off with, this would be our catch-up period, right? Because I'm trying to equalize what happened a little bit and level that field for anybody who's been sitting on something. Because if we say, the past year, you could be like, well, but this got voted on, I was waiting for this all to happen, and now you're telling me I can't even come forward with the thing?
Right.
So,
Remind me of of what happened and the timing. The town voted in what
town
year to do
voted
what?
not this past year, the year before, to reestablish
year?
the ethics committee. So this 20,
2022.
yeah. So, because in '23, we all got elected, right?
So in 2022,
The town reestablished the ethics committee.
that was March of 2022.
Yes, the process,
Allowed the moderator to appoint,
the ethics
board
committee
or the
members
until the following.
until the following
Election.
election.
he didn't appoint,
No.
He didn't
but the
appoint.
election occurred.
That
A
election
year later.
occurred,
A
we
year
all
later.
ran in '23.
But
and we were-
meanwhile, the committee was vacant.
Yes.
Right.
So anybody who had a burning issue in '22, once that committee could have been established and sat with it, now we are in '23, we get elected and we are taking our time to establish a good process. If I come forward and I say, in April of 2022, this thing happened, and as a committee, we say, nope, sorry, that falls outside of our year framework. I don't find that
Right.
to be reasonable. So I'm just saying, as a catch-up,
And part of the complaint process is an investigation, and so if we take one of these and we say, nobody remembers anything, the person you're talking about died or is no longer employed, we could still not have an official hearing if we can't, if it's too old, but we at least give that opportunity for people who have been sitting on something,
Well, maybe a 2-year compromise would be good.
yeah?
expands it, that's not too far.
I think, I like the 2-year because then it captures the period in question were it to happen again.
Sure.
Right.
Where, some reason the whole board's vacant and the moderator chooses not to fill the positions.
Sure.
Okay, so 2 years with your verbiage?
I think so,
Yes.
with a reasonably expected.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so see if the matter is a violation complaint and will be considered by the committee only if it occurred within 2 years for a reasonably known, blah, blah, blah. You're gonna give those words to Eileen. So
I got 'em.
You got 'em. The committee will determine whether it has jurisdiction over the issue raised in the complaint and whether there should be a hearing on the matter. The existence, but not necessarily the contents of a complaint and the status are public data. In accordance to RSA, all other information regarding the complaint and any related hearing shall be considered non-public while it's under consideration by the committee until which time it becomes public. The minutes of these sessions and hearings will be sealed. The complainant will be notified of the findings and recommendations. Okay, there's a lot more there, and that's that process, right? Because a hearing needs to have all the hearing process. We have to notify the person who's been complained at, right? We have to investigate, yeah. Oh, that's the rules.
This
That's
is-
not a process.
Well, the rules and the process are the same thing. No?
Process is you do this, then you do this. You notify this person before you find your list of people you need to talk to. You talk to these people, you schedule a meeting. you
So
schedule a-
change this and put down process. Will that make you happy?
No, those are rules. It says you're not allowed to. There is a notice here.
What document are we looking at?
Rules regarding conduct of hearing. It says
Oh,
you're gonna provide a notice. There's a RSA. You can't, you're saying you can record things if you wish, but you have to let people know. You can't misuse confidential information. See, this is very written about what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. A process is, this is the order in which, this is the people who need to be notified. This is when, how long our investigation can go. This is how we do a non-public hearing. This is what we do if people don't show up when we've asked them to show up. Can we tape, like, that's that whole flow chart as opposed to what your rights are, I think.
process is flexible, rules are inviolable.
Right.
But this was, I think this was written by John McCausland in 2005 or whenever. But this is simply copied from that. I mean, I
Absolutely.
didn't,
No, and that's what I'm saying. These are great rules. This is good. I appreciate this, and I think it took into state law and all that. But how we go from, we received a complaint, we opened it in non-public, we, based on as written, we decide this needs to go forward as a complaint. These are the people we need to reach out to. Who's gonna talk to those people ahead of time? Are we gonna not have any ahead of time investigation, go straight to a hearing? That whole process we haven't sort of figured out yet. I think, unless we do that and I forgot. The process for a complaint process, do we have that? Sorry, process for a complaint. Somebody's gonna fill out this form. It's gonna get dropped in there, right? And we're gonna bring it in, non-public, we're gonna open it up. Then what? Do we read through and say, there's not enough information and send it back? Do we then immediately reach out to the person who the complaint is and say, hey, there's a complaint, we're gonna start a process? Do we say, look, the complaint is not ethical at all, and so it's not an ethical concern, it's a whatever, which is what you said, is it in our jurisdiction? So how do we determine whether it's in our jurisdiction? And if it's not, then what happens? Like that flow chart piece, I don't have my head, I don't see that reflected.
In this document.
Or could someone tell me, if you think we have a complaint process, could you summarize what that is?
Oh, yeah, I'm not clear that we do have a process.
Right,
And what you're really talking about is a process to go from complaint to hearing, though? Or are you
And
talking
then-
about the process for simply intaking and considering?
it's intaking, considering, and then when do we move to a hearing? How do we notify that person that there's going to be a hearing? When we have the hearing, when do we get rid of everybody to have our discussion, or do we do it within that? And then, once we've decided, yes, this was an ethical violation, do we communicate, who do we communicate that to? Right, if there's a complaint about an elected official, who do we reach out to? If it's an employee, who do we reach out to? Like that whole process, I don't think we've already gone there yet.
We haven't. You know, we have the preliminary part of how we're gonna start everything.
Right.
You know, when I'm looking at process, you know, there's also the piece of it, not to, you know, throw some other information in there,
That's
but, you know, so when we had the, you know, when we have something that's really sort of anonymous, there isn't necessarily the need or opportunity or that where we have to do the litmus test of like, should I even be involved in this?
Right.
Versus when we're looking at very specific information related to very specific people, we'll have to have that
Recusal
as
and
the
yep.
recusal and reviewing the information, saying, all right, who shouldn't even be in the room for this, right? So we have to build all of that in and
Right.
then identify, you know, how we do gather people, how do we warn people that, you know, it's happening, how do we, right?
Right.
And is the hearing a public hearing? Is it, you know, do we do that process with inviting the community into the room to see it? Do we not? Like, what is our threshold for that? Like, we haven't gone anywhere near any of that yet.
Right, well, I think we did say we were gonna maybe do a non-public hearing. I think we talked about that, and that's what Neil wrote, but still, if you need other people, you need to call before, not just the complainant and the complainee, or those two people, but are there other people that can help with that information, because they were also in the room, and then how do we,
You know, witnesses.
witnesses, yeah, right?
Well, so to your original question, I think that here, if we're gonna do flow charts, then we should start breaking out how we take it in and how we get to the point of deciding whether we're going to move to hearing or not. At the point where we, as a group, decide that we're going to hearing, I think a whole separate process needs to be very clearly articulated on the process for the actual hearing, which is different from the consideration of whether we go to one or not. So I think C here is adequate for us to at least take that first step to say, are we moving to complaint?
Determine should be. So we should say we're going into non-public to determine whether or not, right?
The question of whether or not the hearing is in private, that's a sticky wicket because all court hearings are public.
But it's
And
not.
people are accused of all kinds of nasty
Right.
things.
Right, but the triaging of the document, opening it and determining, okay, we have what we need to move forward, that's gonna be in that no
Right,
public
in the non-
triage, right?
Right.
And, I don't know in 15 minutes if we can agree on whether or not we're gonna do a non-public or public hearing. I mean, we could go there, but I think if to your point is, this is how we get to the hearing.
Right.
And we save the hearing or not,
Right.
So,
Yeah, and so I think for this document, all we need to do is get to the, you know,
Hearing.
the consideration of the issue. Is this something that we feel merits a hearing? And if so, then we move
go to
to
the
this
other-
whole other set of rules.
right. Okay, so how would you summarize the getting to that point?
It will be considered by the committee, blah, blah, the committee will determine whether or not it has jurisdiction over the issue in the complaint and whether there should be a hearing on the matter. It's already covered.
So, no, but that's not a process, right? So we're gonna open it in non-public.
Right.
We realize that it's a complaint, not an inquiry, so we go into this process. This
Right.
process means we will read through it
Go to C.
together. We're gonna say, does this sound like an ethics complaint? If so, we can move forward, otherwise, we'll respond to the complainant. Let's say
Well,
this-
and has this party gone through every step
Right,
that they could to arrive here,
Ameliorate the issue.
right?
Well, I think that's the consideration of
Yeah.
whether we're at the point of a
So,
hearing.
but
the
that's
process is all of
that's the
those things
checklist,
covered,
right?
right.
So, and then, you know, do they meet the threshold that we determine for,
Right.
right?
So have they gone through what they were supposed to, escalation process, does this seem like it's something that's an ethical consideration or not, which is do we have jurisdiction? Do we have everything we need to go to hearing, right? One of the things in one of the forms is we can have an investigation before the hearing, which I don't know that we want to do that, but there might be some extra things that we need before we can schedule a hearing. We also have to decide if it's in the time frame that we've allowed, right? I think that's, so, once we go through all those things, we say yes, then we have to, we have to notify the complainant and the complainee.
Then
Like, even before you go to the hearing, you have to notify them.
notify
right?
people that there has been a complaint filed, the committee has determined that there should be a hearing, and here's the process and the
So-
timeframes.
So who needs to be notified?
The complainant and the respondent.
But not their
Witnesses?
boss? No, the chair of their committee, the boss at work. Do we not go there yet?
Not
Wouldn't they
yet.
be the
No.
respondent?
It'll be after.
What I mean is if you're my boss and we work in the town and let's say at the transfer station, and you're the supervisor, I'm the employee, I've come to you with a complaint or whatever, and you blew it off, and then I file a formal complaint, and then you would notify that, you would get notification that there's been a complaint, an ethics complaint filed, and you are identified in it.
Yes, ma'am.
Employee to employee, employee to supervisor, personnel-related item?
It's not ethics, is it? Or is it?
I don't know, but have they, so,
Right, have they
so
already-
this is the litmus test, like, if you notice the Board of Selectmen doesn't discuss personnel-related items in public sessions. So, because of statutes regarding people's confidentiality, right, for their employment. So, can we? Should we? Those are issues I think that we would have to bear out. So, I mean, like, I know you're just throwing an example out there, but employee to employee, employee to supervisor, I think, is a sort of a separate, very complicated issue. Like, if you gave me one, you said, I went to the transfer station, and I threw out a bag of recyclable cans that I bought in Massachusetts that have a dollar amount attached to them. And I noticed one of the in-town employees, rather than throwing them in the recycling bucket that we crush and send to generate income for the town, that employee took that bag and threw it in the back of their pickup truck. Right? And I don't think that's ethical, because they're taking money from the town. They didn't necessarily do anything wrong. I don't know if this is illegal to take trash, but they just, essentially robbed the town of a little bit of money that we would have gotten for the metal. Is that an
Right.
ethical violation? So as a resident of the town against the town employee, noting a behavior, not saying it's illegal, but is that ethical? Is that the right thing to do?
Right, so my question for the group is, if they did the escalation path, they've already talked to this person's boss and didn't get it, and they came to us.
Yep.
So when we decide to have a hearing, do we notify the boss that we're gonna have this hearing about this issue that theoretically they've already been notified about, but do we give them the date and the time and invite them to that hearing, or is it not really their business? I don't know if that's the right word.
Would
but-
would it be appropriate for us to notify the Board of Selectmen, since my understanding of the structure in the town is they're the employer, right? They are the boss.
Yep.
So on any case where a town employee is involved, that we would notify them and let them do notifications? As the employer, where we're not the employer. And, we don't have any authority other than, at the end of the day, to say, we think there was an ethical violation. It's still gonna go back to the Board of Selectmen, in terms of an employment matter. But I personally don't think that we should be in the, reaching out to departments in town and saying, you need to show up here on this date,
No,
no.
but there's a notification and then there's the telling them
Or,
to
or
come,
even,
right?
or even
Right.
you, because if the supervisor of the unit is not the respondent, they're not the one that was complained about,
Mm-hmm.
then why are they being notified by us? It may be that there's a management reason to do that, but that would be the discretion of the selectmen, not
Mm-hmm. Okay.
us. So
So the
I'm-
people we would notify in that case is the person who did the complaining and the person who was complained about, and no one else. Based on what we have for findings, we send it to the right body.
Well, what I was suggesting actually was that if there is a town employee involved as the respondent, not the complainant, but the respondent, that we would notify the selectmen as a matter of course, because they are the ultimate responsible. And so they could be involved in saying, well, as, whatever the investigation was, maybe they have more information, maybe they want the department head to participate in the hearing in some way, I don't know.
Well, so like, because what's the end game here? The end game would be maybe a recommendation, right? Let's say, take my case, right? Somebody took a bag of recyclable cans from Massachusetts out of the compactor because they wanted to get the $25 worth of whatever. And so we determined that that is an ethical violation. And we make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that they may want to look at their policies related to, the transfer station, that no employee should take anything from the transfer station, including a television that's left in the still good shed, because of a potential, perception of unethical or inappropriate behavior by townspeople,
So in that scenario, they don't need to know about the hearing coming and how the sausage meets the road. They'll get the advice based on our briefing at the
that,
end.
yes, we see this, we determined that your complaint has weight, employees shouldn't be taking things that, towns, whatever we decide, and that because the recommendation would be, we're not fining people, we're not,
Right.
it's just a recommendation like, hey, that this might be something, Board of Selectmen, that we're not going to get into the specifics, but you may want to look at policies related to employees being able to take things dropped off by this and so. I mean, does that, that would be our end game, right? Like,
Right, so then they don't need to know about the hearing. They don't know that they don't need to know that this is coming up, because it might even be unfounded, and then they don't need to know.
And we wouldn't know, we would never know from, unless an employee told us, if they had already been, there had already been some sort of corrective action plan or something that happened as a result of their behavior at work, right? We aren't gonna know that walking in if they got a letter of warning or a memo of counsel or some sort of corrective action, we don't know.
Right,
The person complaining isn't gonna know if that person already
right.
has received some sort of impact related
Right.
to their behavior.
Right.
Our focus, I think, would be about how do we assist bodies, whatever body that may be, in creating paths that protect, all of the parties, right? The individual, the organization, and the community at large, right? We can advise. We're not doing anything other than advising.
I agree. What I was gonna say is I think our end game, however, is more to educate all of the people, all of the employees, the board members, the committee members in town as to what are the ethical standards that we're supposed to live under and prevent these things from happening
Yeah.
in the first place.
Which is the recommendation.
Right, but that's why I am inclined to notify the selectmen the select board in a case where an employee is involved, just so that all of those things can I don't have to know about it, I don't have to be part of that, but I think as the managers of the employees of the town, they are better positioned than we are in our, we're hearing about this one little thing, and as you said, there may be a whole lot more information.
But according to our process, when somebody comes to us with a complaint, one of the questions that we're asking is, have you exhausted all of the other opportunities, right? So, to me, that would include, did you tell the person's supervisor? Did you, to remedy this? Have you gone through those channels, or you're not satisfied? Probably, you know, you're not gonna be satisfied because the public is not privy to the personnel-related items for an employee. So, you know, if that person still sees that guy working the next Saturday, they're not doing anything about it, they don't get, you know what I mean? Like, so I could see that being an issue, the way that they might know that something has changed, or the remedy might be, there's now a policy in the town employee manual that says, you know, and that's my relief. So, you know, like, it's the sticky wicket, right? Because we're saying, did you do all these things to remedy the situation? You know, going back in as this committee saying, you know, have you addressed this with the employee, or did you know about this with your employee? I mean, are we setting up an employee for an impact on their career progression by bringing it forward that way? It's a question.
I don't see how that would be possible. I mean, it would be irresponsible of a board, the selectmen in this, or select board in this case, to take what is a complaint and to take action on it, on solely what we provided them. So I think it's unlikely that it would, you know, that would play out that way, that somebody would be, you know, unfairly disciplined or career affected simply because the ethics committee said somebody filed an ethics complaint, which we haven't founded yet. We haven't had a hearing, it's just a complaint. What I was looking at was, when we get to hearing, what we want is a full discussion from all sides. And that body is, being the body that is responsible at the end of the day for all of the employees in town, would be in a position to make sure that we had that information available, or those resources, human resources or whatever.
But they can't
Available.
give us
They can't.
those.
They can't give us what?
They can't give us human resource employee details, right? But
No, I'm not talking about giving us the, again, we are, what we're talking about right now is a very specific human resource issue.
right.
I don't see that being the norm for what comes
Right.
forward. And again, I'm not attached to, if we don't want to send it to the selectmen, great, let's not send it to the selectmen, or the select board, excuse me. But I think when we get to the hearing part, we're gonna have to discuss who, I mean, let's face it,
Okay.
who are we talking about? When there's a complaint of ethics, it's going to be a town employee, or an elected official, or an appointed official.
Yep.
Otherwise, we don't have jurisdiction.
Right. So I guess what I'm hearing is, this is back to the may and the shall. So we always have to reach out to the person who complained and the person who's being complained about. We may include the select board, we may include their supervisor, who may have some legally shareable information.
Sure.
But not required. And case by case, we'll figure out who needs to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it may also facilitate future discussion between the select board and the employees to prevent this sort of, the appearance of an ethical violation in the future.
Right.
If
Make
they're
a
aware.
recommendation, yeah.
Right.
Any rate,
So from a flow chart process up to that point, is that clear? Is that something you
Yeah, I
can
mean,
send out?
I think we can start that process. I think when
Okay.
we start getting into, you know, because we're gonna have to create templates and documents and hearing notices and all the like.
Right.
What about situations where the select board is not directly involved? For example, library. Library trustees are elected. I think library employees are town employees,
Yes.
but they're hired, I thought they're hired by the library and the board of trustees of the library, not the selectmen.
Right.
who
So-
fires them?
I'm sorry?
Who fires them? Who has the ability?
The library director can fire them. And I think the board, and I know the board of trustees or can fire the director. But, so if there were a library situation, which would come before us, because they're town employees or whatever, elected officials, but you wouldn't want to notify the selectmen.
Right, no, that's a
Right,
fair point.
right.
I'm not, I will stipulate that I do not understand a lot of the intricacies
Right.
of town governance.
Right, and so, so because it's a May, then we get to the library one, we'll say, really, we need, obviously, we notify the library director, perhaps, and then maybe the trustees,
Notify the
depending on.
appropriate.
Right. We may notify the appropriate escalation group, the management people, the, whatever, yeah, work on words.
So in effect, you're modifying the rules that the original committee adopted about the notice of the hearing.
Written notice to both the complainant and the respondent, right, and supporting
Right,
materials.
and that was period.
Yep.
So in their view, no notice was given to anyone else, selectmen or whatever.
They didn't say you will not notify,
No,
they said
but
you
it-
will notify those two.
That's correct. But you're saying that we will notify,
No,
we
we
may
may.
notify others.
May notify others.
And I think, again, that's gonna be that case by case, but by having a may, we have that
But again, remember, this, what we're talking about right now is our process rules, or our process, not a hard, fast rule.
right.
So we're trying to make sure that people have an opportunity to be fairly heard, and that nobody is,
Well, and there was something in the original process that said we could have an investigation. Investigation theoretically says you're talking to more people than those two, right? So as soon as you talk to those other people, they've been given notice that there's gonna be a hearing, right? So I don't think that that precludes us from talking to other people.
Oh, no, it clearly doesn't preclude us.
We are after time.
I'd like to make a motion.
She's all wrapped up.
I'm ready.
So, all right, so then, do I have a second?
Wait, before you do that, does everybody understand what they're doing?
I believe.
Okay.
So you're gonna take the small addendums you have something that you need to change to get to Eileen, so that she
Yes.
can do her piece.
Yep.
She's gonna work on a flow chart, thought process, it doesn't have to be an actual chart,
Yep.
of those three things,
Yep.
up until we decide we need a hearing. The other part, we haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, no.
Okay, good, all right, do I have a second? All in favor of going home?
Aye.
Okay, all right, thank you for sticking with us, town of Ware people.
How many were there, Beth? 3?
10.
Ooh, team up out there.
Can you hit the kill switch?